Little girl sobbed as stepfather forced her to beg garbage for dinner. Until Millionaire saw and the alley reeked of rotting food and damp cardboard. A tiny girl, no more than 8 years old, crouched beside a dumpster with trembling hands. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her hair tangled from neglect. She clutched an old grocery bag that sagged with scraps of spoiled bread and bruised apples. Behind her stood a man, her stepfather, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Keep digging, Emma. We need dinner." She flinched, her small body shrinking under his shadow. She wasn't crying from the smell or the dirt on her fingers. She was crying because she knew other children were at home with warm meals and laughter while she was being forced to beg from garbage bins. And that's when headlights cut across the alley. A sleek black car slowed to a stop. From inside stepped a man in his 40s, dressed in a tailored suit, the kind of man who looked as though the world bent to his will. His name was Richard Hale, a self-made millionaire known in business circles for his relentless drive. But in that moment, he wasn't thinking about business. He was staring at the sight of a child digging through trash. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't just walk past. Richard approached slowly. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. The stepfather straightened, a fake grin plastered across his face. "Oh, just teaching the kid some responsibility. She's fine." But Richard's eyes locked on Emma. She wasn't fine. Her eyes told a different story, one of hunger, fear, and hopelessness. Richard knelt down to her level. "Sweetheart, are you hungry?" She hesitated, glanced nervously at her stepfather, then gave the smallest nod. That one gesture hit Richard like a punch. He remembered being a boy himself, sleeping in the back of a broken-down car with his mother after his father abandoned them. Hunger was something he knew all too well. Without another word, he stood, pulled out his phone, and called his driver. "Take this child and me to the nearest diner. Now." The stepfather started to protest, but Richard's eyes hardened, his voice dropping to a tone that left no room for argument. "You've done enough?" Minutes later, Emma sat in a warm booth, her tiny hands wrapped around a glass of milk. The waitress brought plate after plate, chicken tenders, mashed potatoes, warm rolls dripping with butter. Emma ate cautiously at first, as if afraid the food might be snatched away, but soon hunger overcame fear, and she devoured every bite. Richard watched silently, his throat tightening. When she finally slowed down, Emma whispered, "Thank you, sir." It wasn't just gratitude, it was relief. And something inside Richard shifted. He realized this wasn't a moment he could walk away from. The next day, Richard didn't return to his corporate office like usual. Instead, he began making calls. Lawyers, social workers, local authorities. He dug into Emma's situation and discovered the truth. Her mother had passed away a year earlier, and custody had fallen to the stepfather, a man with a record of neglect. Richard faced a choice. He could help for a day, or he could change this girl's life forever. And he chose the latter. Through weeks of hearings, paperwork, and countless battles, Richard stood by Emma's side. For the first time in her life, someone fought for her. Someone believed she deserved more than dumpsters and scraps. The emotional climax came one rainy afternoon in a small courtroom. Emma sat clutching Richard's hand as the judge read the final decision. Her stepfather's custody was terminated, and she was placed in Richard's care as her guardian. Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from joy. She wrapped her arms around Richard, whispering, "Do I really get to come home with you?" Richard hugged her tightly. "We're home now, sweetheart, and you'll never have to beg for food again." Months passed, and Emma blossomed. The little girl who once dug through garbage now thrived in school, laughed freely, and slept in a warm bed. Richard, who thought his heart had hardened after years of chasing wealth, discovered something priceless. The love of a child who saw him not as a millionaire, but as the man who gave her hope. And the message was clear. Kindness doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's just stopping when others would walk past. Sometimes it's believing a child deserves better. Richard thought he was saving Emma, but in truth, Emma saved him too. She reminded him that true success isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the lives we touch. The nights were the hardest for Emma. For years, she had curled herself on cold floors, listening to her stepfather's heavy footsteps and harsh words. But now, when she closed her eyes, she felt the softness of a real bed, the comfort of a nightlight, and the safety of knowing someone would be there in the morning. Richard often stood quietly in the doorway, watching her breathe evenly as she slept. He had spent half his life chasing numbers, contracts, and recognition, yet none of those victories compared to this, the peace of knowing he had saved a child from despair. There were moments when Emma still flinched at sudden noises or held back tears out of fear she might be scolded. Richard never rushed her healing. He simply knelt beside her, reminded her she was safe, and showed her through small actions, warm meals, gentle words, and endless patience, that love didn't hurt, it healed. One evening after dinner, Emma handed Richard a crayon drawing she had made. It was a simple picture, a little girl holding the hand of a tall man with a smile. Above it, she had written in shaky letters, "Am I real, Dad?" Richard's throat closed up. He realized that despite all his achievements, this was the legacy he wanted, the chance to be the person she could depend on. As time passed, their bond deepened. Emma's laughter filled the halls of Richard's home, echoing louder than any silence he had ever known. She began to dream again, talking about becoming a teacher, maybe even an artist. Richard encouraged every dream, knowing that belief was the greatest gift he could give her. And while Emma gained a future, Richard discovered a truth he had long forgotten, that wealth means little if it isn't shared, and that the greatest investment a person can make is in another human being. In Emma's smile, Richard found redemption. In his arms, Emma found home. Together, they proved that even in the darkest alleys, light can appear when someone chooses to care.